The sting of judgment from a stranger cuts deeper than you'd expect, especially when it's delivered with a smirk in the quiet of a morning you thought was yours. That's exactly how my day started, standing on my porch in Willow Grove, a tidy little neighborhood in Raleigh, North Carolina, with a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands. It was barely 7 a.m. on a crisp April morning in 2024, and I was savoring the peace until her voice sliced through it like a shard of glass. "Sloppy," Deborah muttered, loud enough for me to catch, but soft enough to pretend it wasn't meant for the whole street to hear. I froze, coffee spilling over my fingers, my pulse hammering with the kind of shock only petty malice can spark. Deborah wasn't just any neighbor. She was the neighbor president of the Willow Grove Homeowners Association, a brunette dynamo in pressed linen blouses who ruled our block like it was her personal fiefdom. I'd only been here 5 months, trying to keep my head down, but apparently, that wasn't enough for her. My unstyled hair, my slightly overgrown lawn, and God forbid me mismatched porch chairs were, in her eyes, a blight on her perfect suburban VY shown. Her tiny dachshund, Duchess, yipped at her side, as if echoing her owner's disdain. Deborah shot me a smug glance, her designer flats clicking on the sidewalk as she sauntered off, Leah VYing me rooted to the spot, humiliation burning in my chest. I saw curtains twitch, neighbors peeking out, but no one said a thing. Spineless. I wanted to fire back, to unleash the sarcasm simmering in my gut, but I bit my tongue, sipped my coffee, and swore she wouldn't see me crack. I'd dealt with her kind before, bullies hiding behind a veneer of respectability, and I had a feeling this was just the opening act. By noon, a yellow notice was taped to my door. Violation, trash bins VY Cybele from street. Never mind that they were neatly stowed by my garage, exactly where city rules required. The fine? A ridiculous due law 200. I snapped a photo, time-stamped it, and emailed the HOA, copying the city inspector. Deborah's reply came in under an hour, dripping with condescension. "We uphold a certain standard here, Miss Harper. Please comply to maintain our community's elegance." The hypocrisy was galling. Her husband's beat-up, then sat in their driveway, untouched by her wrath. I paced my VYing room, torn between paying the fine to avoid trouble and the fire in my gut screaming to fight back. The next day, another notice arrived. This time, it was my unapproved seasonal decor, a slightly faded autumn wreath I hadn't taken down. Deborah wasn't just nitpicking, she was hunting me. I was her new obsession, the neighborhood's punching bag, and no one dared intervene. But what she didn't know was that I'd grown up around people like her, petty tyrants who thrived on control. I'd learned how to serve VYVE them, and more importantly, how to outplay them. The real kicker came the following evening. I was hauling groceries from my car when I caught her at the edge of my driveway, phone out, snapping photos of my sedan. "Need something?" I called, my voice tight. She didn't even look up. "Just documenting violations, dear," she said, the dear landing like a slap. Neighbors passed by, some with pitying glances, others avoiding my eyes. No one spoke. Deborah's power was a blunt weapon, and most were too scared to cross her. My anger simmered, coiling tighter, ready to spring. But then, the universe threw me a curveball I never saw coming. At 7:30 a.m. the next day, my doorbell rang. Bleary-eyed, still in my pajamas, I opened the door to find Deborah not the polished queen of Willow Grove, but a disheveled mess. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged, clutching a crumpled envelope stuffed with papers. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice fragile, almost pleading. I was too stunned to do anything but nod, stepping aside as she shuffled into my VYing room. She collapsed into my armchair, the one she'd probably sneered at 100 times, and blurted, "I need a loan." My brain stalled, grappling with the absurdity. The woman who'd branded me sloppy in front of the entire street was now begging me for money. "A loan?" I repeated, half expecting her to laugh it off. She nodded, her perfectly manicured nails tapping nervously. "It's medical bills. For my husband," she whispered. "We're drowning." I leaned back, letting the silence stretch, watching her squirm. The Deborah I knew, arrogant, untouchable, was gone, replaced by a woman whose carefully curated life was unraveling. "Doesn't the HOA pay you?" I asked, knowing full well it didn't. Her face flushed. "My husband's business collapsed," she admitted, her voice cracking. "We're behind on everything." The house. She trailed off, but the threat of foreclosure hung heavy. I should have felt pity. Instead, a cold satisfaction curled in my chest. Karma had arrived, and it was glorious. So, the sloppy neighbor's your lifeline? I said, sharper than I meant. She winced, but didn't argue. I misjudged you, she mumbled. But it wasn't remorse, it was desperation. She slid the envelope across my coffee table. Inside were overdue bills, foreclosure warnings, and a staggering pile of debt, tens of thousands. Her perfect world was a house of cards, and she thought I'd prop it up. How much? I asked, my tone flat. 6,000, she whispered, as if the number burned her. 6,000 reasons to say no. 6,000 chances to savor this moment. I tapped my fingers on the table, studying her. I'll think about it, I said slowly, relishing the flicker of hope and fear in her eyes. But this neighborhood has standards, Deborah. I wouldn't want to help someone who doesn't uphold our elegance. Her face paled. She stood, clutching the envelope, and muttered, I understand, before dropping it back on the table and fleeing, the door slamming behind her. I stood there, the air thick with her desperation, and realized I held the upper hand. But this wasn't the end, it was the opening move. That night, over a glass of Merlot, I pored over her documents. It wasn't just bills and foreclosure notices. There were tax liens, small claims filings, and a bombshell, a cease and desist letter accusing Deborah and her husband of fraud in his failed business. The Queen of Willow Grove, the self-appointed guardian of our VY2, was a con artist. A grin spread across my face. I didn't just have a choice, I had leverage. Petty revenge wouldn't cut it. Deborah deserved something sharper, something that would dismantle her empire for good. I started with preparation, making copies of her documents, USB drives, encrypted emails, cloud backups. If she came for me, I'd be ready. Then came research. Hours spent digging through county records and HOA bylaws uncovered a goldmine. Deborah's husband was under investigation for fraud, and she'd been cited for conflicts of interest on the HOA board. A scandal waiting to detonate. I began small, planting seeds of doubt at a neighborhood barbecue. Over plastic cups of sangria, I asked casual questions about the HOA budget, watching eyes narrow. Next, I built alliances. The Thompsons, fined for their garish mailbox, were eager to talk. The Garcias, dinged for their lawn flamingos, had grudges of their own. Everywhere I looked, I found quiet resentment simmering beneath polite smiles. All they needed was a nudge. I hosted a community enhancement meeting, framing it as a chance to brainstorm beautification projects. To my delight, half the neighborhood showed up, including Deborah, who arrived late, her smile strained. As she droned on about standards, I waited for the perfect moment. Deborah, I said, voice honey-sweet, can you clarify how our HOA fees are spent? We'd love some transparency. Her composure faltered, just for a second, but I saw a first crack in her armor. It's public record, she said, too smoothly. I can prepare a report. Oh, a summary now would be great, I pressed. Transparency builds trust, right? Heads nodded. Her smile tightened. She stumbled through vague excuses about landscaping and events, but the seed was planted. Doubt had taken root. My next move was bolder. I sent an anonymous email to the neighborhood, listing Deborah's conflicts of interest, her husband's fraud investigation, and public documents to back it up. No accusations, just questions that begged answers. Within days, Willow Grove was buzzing. Neighbors who once shrank from Deborah's glare now whispered behind her back. Social and VY dried up. HOA meetings grew tense. Her reign was fraying, and I was holding the scissors. But I wasn't done. I pushed for a formal audit of the HOA's finances, rallying enough signatures to force it onto the agenda. Deborah tried to block it, but the neighborhood now united overpowered her. The audit meeting was a spectacle. Deborah sat at the head of the table, rigid, her lips a thin line, as the accountant exposed every discrepancy, every shady deal. When the fraud allegations surfaced, she snapped. I did what I had to for my family. The room went silent. Even her loyalists squirmed. I leaned forward, voice calm but cutting. We all protect our families, Deborah. But what about our community? Our trust? That was the moment she broke. Her carefully built trust collapsed under her own hubris. The fallout was swift. Deborah, once untouchable, became a pariah. Her allies abandoned her, and a formal complaint to the state HOA Oversight Board triggered an investigation. Within a month, her house was foreclosed, her husband's business crumbled under fraud charges, and a class action lawsuit spearheaded by me and others hit her for misappropriation of funds. Her pristine home, once a symbol of her dominance, sat neglected, grass creeping up, a monument to her ruin. At one point, she came to my door, gaunt and desperate. "I'm losing everything," she pleaded. I studied her, the power shift almost dizzying. "You already have," I said, closing the door. The legal hammer fell hard. Deborah was fined, banned from HOA boards for life, and her house was repossessed. She vanished soon after, Leah VYing a crooked for sale sign in her yard. The neighborhood threw a block party, complete with a cake reading, "Good riddance." It was petty, glorious, and so damn satisfying. Just when I thought it was over, a bombshell landed in my mailbox. An unmarked envelope stuffed with emails, bank statements, and screenshots revealed Deborah hadn't acted alone. She'd funneled HOA contracts to shady businesses owned by other board members, landscaping, maintenance, even overpriced holiday lights. It was a suburban cartel, and names like Mark Reynolds, the HOA treasurer, and Linda Carter, the compliance chair, were all over it. They'd smiled at barbecues while pocketing our money. This was bigger than Deborah. It was systemic corruption, hidden behind Raleigh's manicured lawns. I sent the EVY Denke to a local news outlet hungry for a scoop. Within days, reporters were knocking on doors, and the neighborhood hummed with fear, not gossip. Board members resigned in droves. Mark's house went up for sale overnight. Linda fled to Georgia. The expose hit like a grenade. Suburban scam. HOA embezzlement uncovered. The county prosecutor launched an investigation, charges were filed, and the HOA was dissolved, replaced by a transparent resident committee. Willow Grove bloomed after that. Gardens grew wild, kids raced scooters down driveways, and block parties became weekly rituals. Mismatched lawn chairs and fairy lights dotted front yards, a quiet rebellion against Deborah's legacy. But the final twist came a year later, in May 2025. A neighbor sent me a listing from a nearby town, Carya Trailer Park, with a new manager, Deborah M. I drove there, curiosity burning. The park was gritty but alive, with gravel paths, plastic flamingos, and kids' toys scattered about. And there she was, clipboard in hand, in a faded polo, her once perfect hair in a messy bun. Our eyes met for a split second, and I saw its shame. She looked away, burying herself in her paperwork. Word spread. Deborah, who'd find people for faded wreaths, was now managing a place where lawn gnomes were a lifestyle. She wasn't Thrive VYing dealing with real problems like broken pipes and neighbor disputes. Her authority a shadow of what it once was. I heard she even lost a mediation over a yard full of car parts and a Bigfoot statue. Her dog, Duchess, now scruffy, lounged in a kiddie pool outside a trailer. Poetic didn't begin to cover it. Months later, she resurfaced, emailing the neighborhood from a new account. "Let's restore Willow Grove's prestige." She taped flyers to mailboxes, announcing a community pride meeting at the Cary Library. I went, expecting a show. The room was nearly empty, save for stale donuts and a flickering projector. Deborah stood, trying to look regal in a worn blazer, pitching a new HOA with strict rules. But the crowd neighbors who'd tasted freedom wasn't HVYing it. Mr. Thompson, usually quiet, asked, "Is this the same Deborah sued for stealing our money?" The room erupted in murmurs. Another neighbor brought up her husband's fraud. Deborah floundered, her excuses drowned out by hostile questions. After 20 minutes, she grabbed her donuts and fled, the door slamming behind her. That night, at our block party, we toasted to freedom under fairy lights. Deborah never emailed again. Her flyers vanished. She was done. I got one last glimpse of her, working a discount furniture store in Durham, wearing a red vest next to a clearance sign. The woman who'd called me sloppy was now selling markdown dreams. Life had come full circle. Willow Grove thrived without her. Mr. Thompson painted his house neon green. The Garcias flamingos multiplied. We held an ugliest yard contest, my minion-themed mailbox losing to a neighbor's inflatable T-Rex garden. It wasn't just the decorations, it was the community. We swapped recipes, watched each other's kids, and lived without fear of violation notices. Freedom tasted sweeter after tyranny, especially knowing Deborah was out there, probably writing unenforceable rules for plastic flamingos. So what do you think? Was I too harsh, letting Deborah beg and then exposing her secrets? Should I have helped her when she came to my door, or was her downfall the justice she deserved? Have you ever faced a bully like Deborah, hiding behind rules to control others? Drop your wildest neighborhood stories below. Hit that like button if you love this tale of karma, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog comes out on top. Let's keep the conversation going. What would you have done?